I'm going to. Good afternoon, everybody. I am glad that you have joined us for our webinar. My name is Terry Eichel, and I work with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, a faith-based environmental group in Connecticut. We work with religious communities on environmental issues such as climate change, toxic pollution, and biodiversity loss. We are also the Connecticut affiliate for the Interfaith Power and Light, a national organization with state affiliates across the country. So if you happen to be joining us from another state, I urge you to investigate if there is an IPL where you live because they're awesome. Today, we are presenting this historic house of worship, funding possibilities with Preservation Connecticut. I would like to first open with IREJN's land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that Connecticut, Algonquin for land on the Tidal River, is the traditional home of Mohegans, Pequots, and many other tribes. We are grateful for our Native people's care for their home and will strive to preserve it for the next 7 generations. I also want to let you know we have a couple of upcoming events this Sunday, November 17th. We are presenting with some of our allied organizations 10 short climate films as part of the Climate Future Film Festival. That will be at Eastern Connecticut State University at 4 p.m. And then on Tuesday, December 3rd in the evening, we are presenting a webinar on stopping the Project Maple gas pipeline expansion throughout Connecticut. That information will be sent out to you after this webinar and is also available on our website. So this webinar is the third in a 3-part series designed to help houses of worship reduce their energy use, implement clean energy, and improve their building overall. Our first webinar on September 17th focused on energy efficiency for houses of worship. And our second webinar on October 30th focused on the new direct pay tax rebates available through the federal government for clean energy projects. Both of those webinars are on our website. Today, we will focus on funding for historic renovations through the Connecticut nonprofit organization Preservation CT. And this is because restoration projects often dovetail with other building improvement projects such as energy efficiency or clean energy. We are joined today by Jane Montanaro, from the Executive Director of Preservation CT. She has been a vital part of Preservation Connecticut since 2005 and currently serves as its Executive Director. In her previous PC role, she administered over 550 grants to public and private property owners, totaling more than $5 million. She now leads a team of staff members who help set the state's preservation agenda and restores community vitality. Welcome, Jane. Oh, also, this webinar is being recorded, and after her presentation, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we will get to them at that time. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Terry. So nice to be here. Thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides to share with you. Can you see that? I'm going to assume that you can. So good afternoon. Great. Thanks, Terry. Good afternoon. As Terry said, I'm Jane Montanaro. I'm Executive Director at Preservation Connecticut. Today, we're going to be discussing what historic designations mean for historic houses of worship in Connecticut and the various funding sources that are available for projects at the state and federal level. And I hope to leave you with some tools and information about how to incorporate energy efficient measures into your historic religious buildings. And to kick us off, this is an image of the wonderful Liberty Christian Center in Hartford. The historic name is the Horace Bushnell Church, Horace Bushnell Congregational Church. And some of my staff were there 2 Sundays ago to help them celebrate the unveiling of their restored steeple, with some assistance from Preservation Connecticut, but a lot of assistance from other sources. So for those of you who don't know Preservation Connecticut, let me give you a brief introduction. We're the statewide private nonprofit historic preservation organization Founded in 1975 as the Connecticut Trust for Historic Preservation by a special act of the Connecticut General Assembly, our office is the former boarding house for Eli Whitney's Armory in Hamden, and it's a property on the National Register of Historic Places. And our staff of 9 preservation professionals, shown here, work every day to preserve, protect, and promote the buildings, sites, and landscapes that contribute to the vitality and celebrate the heritage of Connecticut's communities. For nearly 50 years, our big anniversary is next year, we have successfully advocated for the protection of remarkable historic assets like houses of worship by leveraging funding, building community support, promoting partnerships, and advocating for stewardship. And just briefly, I'll let you know what some of the staff members do, because there may be other questions about our work that you have. Chris Wiegren, our deputy director, he's the editor of our bi-monthly magazine, Connecticut Preservation News. He is the program administrator for all preservation easements that we hold. And he just recently published a book, 100 Places in Connecticut, and he does a lot of book talks and talks on our Homestead in Connecticut landscape survey. Renee Tribert is our preservation services manager, and she deals primarily with historic industrial sites and helping municipalities and developers and communities rehab those sites. Jordan Sorensen, our development and special projects manager, she has a special project where she is responsible for all of the demolition notices that municipalities send to us. So we track demolitions, we try to intervene where we can to get salvage taking place or a reuse, preferably for the buildings that are slated for demolition. Kristen Hopewood does our membership and events. And then we have a team of field service that are circuit riders who come out to your sites and can provide guidance on all of the things that I'm going to talk about to you today. So there are boots on the ground, folks that you'll want to call to come out and visit your site and talk to you about your restoration needs and some funding sources. And that's Mike Farino, Brad Scheid, Stacy Vero, and Stefan Danchuk. So in Connecticut, there are at least 70 churches individually listed on the National Register and dozens more contributing to National Register districts. These include early meeting houses like the Abington Congregational Church in Pomfret, which is the oldest continually operating religious structure in the state, having been originally built in 1751 and modified to its current Greek Revival style, first in 1834 and again in 1840. The earliest churches in the state were in fact meeting houses that served as seats of the town government and as houses of worship. Membership in the Congregational Church was a requirement, and attendance at services was mandatory. There were some Anglican and Baptist congregations scattered around the state in the latter part of the colonial era, but the Congregationalists remained the standing order. The spires of their white churches can be seen in nearly every Connecticut town and city. The Connecticut Constitution of 1818 brought about some diversity among other Protestant religions in the form of Episcopalian, Methodist, Baptist, Quaker, and Universalist. The first Catholic masses were held in Lebanon in the 1780s, but it wasn't until the 1820s and the immigration of the Irish Catholics into Connecticut that Catholic houses of worship began to be constructed. The oldest remaining Catholic church is St. John's Church Sacristy in Norwich, which predates the diocese and was constructed in the Gothic Revival style in 1843. The interior is shown on the bottom left here. The spire was added in the 1860s as the church grew to accommodate the growing number of Catholic immigrants arriving in the area to work in the surrounding factories. Temple Beth Israel in Hartford is the oldest standing synagogue in Connecticut, having been completed in 1776 in the Romanesque eclectic style by architect George Keller. It now serves as Charter Oak Cultural Center, and that's on your upper right here. Two of Connecticut's earliest Black churches were Talcott Street, now Faith Congregational Church in Hartford, and Dixwell Avenue Congregational Church in New Haven, both founded in 1820. And at the bottom right, we're showing you Little Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Greenwich, Connecticut. And this congregation was founded in 1882, but the stucco building on the lower right was completed in 1921. Since its founding, Preservation Connecticut has championed hundreds of houses of worship in communities throughout the state. Congregation Mishkan Israel in Hamden is the oldest Jewish congregation in Connecticut and New England, but it is housed in a 1960s modern building with the stained glass windows that can be seen here. Pitt's Chapel in New Haven received grants from Preservation Connecticut in 2023 for furnace and roof repairs that got the congregation back into its sanctuary after being forced out for some period of time. The congregation provides services for the community in the form of a newly opened food pantry, and the building also has a set of 3 Tiffany windows behind the altar that were repurposed from Center Church in New Haven, and you can just about make them out in the photograph. Preservation Connecticut also helps congregations in truly unconventional buildings. The Full Gospel Interdenominational Church in Manchester is housed in an unconventional historic space, a former theater. This church required funding to repair a set of fire doors that were posing a serious safety concern. So one of the subjects I was asked to discuss today was about historic designations and what they mean for congregations. There are several layers of designation status: National Register, whether it's individually listed or as a district listing, the State Register, and local historic districts. To find out about the status of your property or any property in the state, you can go to this database that the State Historic Preservation Office has just launched. It's called concris.gov, and plug in your address. There you will see if the property has been recognized as historic. I will go a bit further into all of these individually in the coming slides, but properties can be listed on the National Register or National Register of Historic Places, whether individually or as part of a larger district. They can also be listed on the State Register of Historic Places or as part of a local historic district. And some properties are listed under all 3. There are also properties that have been identified as part of a historic resource inventory or a survey of properties. These are typically town-wide assessments to determine the location of information about historic properties and are considered a baseline survey for building off of for these other designations. The National Register of Historic Places is the nation's official list of cultural resources at least 50 years old, worthy of preservation because of their significance to American life. This is an honorary listing, and the listing itself does not impose any restrictions on the owner. Properties can be listed individually or as part of a district. Some benefits include eligibility for federal and state grants for preservation activities, rehabilitation through the use of tax incentives, and it provides potential protection from unreasonable destruction under the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act. National Register listed or eligible properties are considered when reviewing federally funded projects under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And finally, it allows consideration of fire and life safety code compliance alternatives when rehabbing historic buildings. Listed here are the criteria for listing in the National Register. To be eligible, a resource, building, structure, district, site, or object must meet at least one of the 4 criteria. Criteria A, resources that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. Criterion B, resources that are associated with the lives of persons significant in our past. Criterion C, resources that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic value or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity. And criterion D, resources that have yielded or may be likely to yield important prehistory or history. So integrity is the ability of the property to convey its significance through a majority of the 7 aspects listed here. They are location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. Our photo here is the Unitarian Universalist Society in Brooklyn, Connecticut, dating from 1771 and designed by architect Daniel Tyler. It is a contributing resource in the Brooklyn Green Historic District and received funding from Preservation Connecticut in 2017. The State Register of Historic Places is also an honorary designation that does not place any specific restrictions on the property owner. All National Register properties are automatically listed on the State Register. The designation does provide a threshold for recognition to access funding and tax incentives from both Preservation Connecticut and the State Historic Preservation Office. Some differences between the National Register and the State Register are that the resource does not need to be 50 years old for the State Register, and it can have a slightly less stringent level of integrity given evaluation of the 7 aspects that we just saw in the last slide. So it is slightly more flexible. These links provide access to a fact sheet about the State Register, as well as a listing to some of the earlier properties to be placed on the State Register. And Marina Wisniewski is the contact at the State Historic Preservation Office. So local historic districts. These are the districts people think of when they say they need to get permission to complete work on their property. If a property is in a local historic district, yes, it does have to abide by some preservation rules. And local historic districts are established by the community. They are established by the municipality through a completed study report, and the owners in the district must approve of this listing by a 2/3 majority vote. Once the municipality approves the local ordinance and establishes a commission, that commission reviews all exterior changes that are visible from a public right-of-way and issues a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed work before it can begin. Here we have an example of a local historic district that issued a certificate of appropriateness for the Congregational Church of Salisbury. And you can make it out in the photo. They have solar panels on their roof, which are visible from the public right-of-way, and which also seem to blend in nicely with the historic, architecture and works well with the historic building. All this work went through an extensive study by the church and review by the local commission. And information about the specific building and process they went through can be found on the link here. We share these slides with you afterwards. The takeaway is that even when properties have a high level of protection locally and a commission to review, a compromise or a good design solution can often be obtained by working together and will also meet the mission of the congregation and maintain the salient character defining features of the building. Historic houses of worship face a wide range of maintenance and repair issues. Some of the more common ones that we see are related to the most vulnerable parts of the buildings. Steeples are often of great concern, whether the building is constructed of masonry or wood frame. This issue was brought to the forefront by the unfortunate loss of the first Congregational Church in New London, seen here on the upper image. Windows are always an issue given their size, age, and the dramatic changes in weather temperature that we face in Connecticut. And we see flooded or damp basements, issue with outdated electrical work, and outdated and inefficient mechanical systems. On the interior, we also see damage to plaster from water infiltration and loss of historic fabric and artwork as a result. There are also issues related to code and ADA compliance. These issues seem overwhelming, but we hope that at Preservation Connecticut, we can offer some guidance and tools. This image shows work being done at the clock tower of the Bethel Congregational Church. One of the first things a congregation should develop, no matter what the specific goal may be, is a preservation plan for the building. While much building maintenance is considered routine, there will be times when unforeseen events due to accidents or extreme weather will occur. Understanding your building and its behavior through regular building assessments will help to identify areas that may be at risk. You can also see from the example shown here, the preservation plan identifies character-defining features and dates them. It records the last known work completed on each feature as well as the current condition. It recommends repairs and prioritizes projects. There are various funding sources that successful projects can draw upon to complete their projects. Preservation Connecticut has an annual capital grant for religious properties, as well as a smaller planning grant for threatened properties. The Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office offers both planning and capital funding for nonprofit organizations. Partners for Sacred Places and the National Fund for Sacred Places offer a variety of tools to build capacity through planning, capital, and capacity grants. Many churches have successfully lobbied their local representatives to get bond funding released directly from the state legislature. Banks often provide community funding for projects as well. The Connecticut Food Share can help with kitchens and capacity building for organizations that provide service of feeding the community. And there is funding related to energy efficiency, such as your own small grant program or the Building Solutions Program through Connecticut Green Bank. Finally, there is the Community Investment Fund 2030, which supports economic development in historically disadvantaged communities. This background image shows the Trinity Episcopal Church on the green in New Haven. So the State Historic Preservation Office, I'll start with some of their funding. They are statutory partners with Preservation Connecticut, and they offer survey and planning grants, which are available for planning and pre-development activities, such as the preparation of state and national register nominations, historic structures reports, feasibility and adaptive reuse studies, condition assessments, and architectural plans and specifications. The current funding cycle, schedule, and additional information is available at the Connecticut ct.gov website, and the program manager is Mary Dunn. Preservation Connecticut offers a small capital grant. This is our maintenance and repair grant. Since 2017, this grant has dispersed $50,000 per year and is funded by the Community Investment Act. And over that time, we have awarded $267,000 to 28 applicants. Each grant offers up to $15,000 per applicant and requires a one-to-one match, and the property must be listed on the state or national register. And these grants are used for distinct repairs, some steeple repair, some exterior paint, foundation repairs, sill repairs, window repairs, projects that can be done in a small chunk of about a $30,000 or so scope of work. When historic places are threatened, Preservation Connecticut can offer a technical assistance consultancy for structural inspection, architectural analysis, and other specialized technical service, typically under $3,000. This program is aimed to provide immediate assistance for organizations that have safety concerns regarding their buildings and who need second opinions and temporary recommendations, or who need to answer a specific technical question for funders. Featured here are two recent properties that have taken advantage of the program. The Hall Chapel at Riverside Cemetery in Waterbury and First Congregational Church in Old Saybrook. The State Historic Preservation Office also offers a capital grant known as the Historic Restoration Fund. It is available to properties that are owned by 501c3, 501c13, or a municipality. The grants range from $5,000 to $200,000 and require a 1-to-1 match. The funds are reimbursed after the project is completed and approved, and an easement is placed on the property, the length of which is determined by the amount of funding received. The image here is of Temple Beth Israel in Danielson, a mid-century modern church designed by a congregation member's son, William Reisman, and built over a period of a decade using stones from the surrounding fields. The building was listed on the State Register of Historic Places, and the Historic Restoration Fund was used to repair the foundation and front patio supports. Partners for Sacred Places is a non-sectarian, nonprofit organization focused on building the capacity of congregations of historic sacred places to serve as anchor institutions in their communities. They accomplish this by providing training programs, completing fundraising assessments, developing business and funding plans, hosting and moderating design charrettes, and fostering community and political engagement. Their work is wide-ranging and includes the Fund for Sacred Places and the Arts in Sacred Places program, which bridges the gap between the excess space often found in historic religious buildings and partners in the arts community who need affordable space to rehearse, perform, and work. Their work also includes so much more, and I encourage you to visit their website for additional information. This slide is the Trinity Episcopal Church in Hartford, one of the Connecticut churches that was accepted into the Partners Program. There have been 7 churches in Connecticut that have received capital campaign and study support through the Partners for Sacred Places. They include Center Church, Trinity Episcopal Church, and Church of the Good Shepherd in Hartford, First Church of Christ Congregational and Second Baptist Church in Suffield, and First Presbyterian Church, or the Fish Church, in Stamford, and Grace Episcopal Church in Windsor. One of the more interesting special projects undertaken by partners is the Interreligious Community Project. This involved 8 congregations around Greater New Haven that together engineered a pioneering program of in-depth learning and relationship building experiences using the vehicles of sacred space and architecture. The group included congregations from the faiths of Islam, Judaism, Eastern Orthodox, Christianity, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, United Church of Christ, and the Society of Friends. The program activities involved a series of architectural religious tours in each congregation's house of worship. This included deciphering theology in space, reflection on theological spatial boundaries, feelings in the context of bounded space, ties between our community, and each space's communal narrative, a ritual demonstration, spiritual journeys by members, and a shared meal. The experiences culminated with taking on civic projects about sacred spaces conceived and implemented by the congregations together. The group authored an interfaith protocol on how to respond to acts of hate brought against houses of worship and their congregants in the wake of the tragic shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. The National Fund for Sacred Places is a program of the Partners for Sacred Places and offers many similar programs found in the Partners Program. Of note, their matching capital grant offers between $50,000 and $500,000. Another important aspect of this particular program is the ability to complete a halo study to analyze the reach and impact of the congregation on the surrounding community. In the background here, you see the interior of the Fish Church in Stamford. It's one of the Connecticut recipients of this program, and Fish Church is also a National Historic Landmark. Preserving Black Churches is a program of the African American Cultural Heritage Action Fund and is administered through the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This program recognizes the foundational place Black churches serve in a community's religious, political, economic, and social life. They serve as houses of worship, safe havens, and social centers that provide vital social services that uplift communities. Preserving Black churches provides support through capital grants, planning, programming, and interpretation, operations, financial sustainability, and rapid response emergency grants for threatened resources. And for more information on that, there's the website at savingplaces.org. So an important part of what we're discussing today has to do with the stewardship of historic buildings. So I want to provide you with some guidance to help you understand what would be expected of you should you end up taking advantage of some of these grant programs, and also provide you with some recommendations for best preservation practices. The Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties was developed by the National Park Service as a general guideline for all preservation activities. They ensure that historic resources retain as much of their important features as possible while still remaining in service. These standards are used to evaluate grants, tax credit funded projects by the SHPO, and it is how Preservation Connecticut evaluates our grant programs. There are 4 categories, and they range from least to most involvement: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. The preservation standard is most strict, and it is often reserved for museums. The most often used standard for buildings that remain in service, or those that will be adaptively reused, is the rehabilitation standard. The restoration standard guides the recreation of portions of historic buildings to a specific time period, while the reconstruction standard uses historic evidence to recreate or replace portions of a lost historic resource. Most congregations will have to eventually make changes to their building to accommodate fire safety or ADA compliance, and these standards help guide those rehabilitations in a way that retains as much of the historic original fabric of the building as possible. Technical preservation briefs are another tool that provide information on preserving, rehabilitating, and restoring historic buildings. These publications help historic building stewards recognize and resolve common problems prior to work. Each brief provides a detailed analysis of a specific preservation issue, from the treatment and cleaning of historic masonry to the repair of wood windows, and all of the subjects listed here: slate roofs, plaster repair, historic masonry with graffiti removal, repointing, general care, window repair, how to identify and preserve character-defining features, energy efficiency in historic buildings, and building code guidance. There are 51 briefs in total, and they are available for download at the National Park Service website. Sustainability is integral to the philosophy of historic preservation, and obviously is an important topic for your organization. As architect Carl Elefanti famously said, "The greenest building is the one that is already built." Preservation and sustainability go hand in hand, but are often presented to be at odds. Sustainable practices are built into many historic buildings. Just think of how cool it can remain in a stone church on a hot summer day. Historic buildings were often sited to take advantage of the seasonal path of the sun, shade trees planted to provide natural cooling to building and streets, and the plan of many cities themselves was based on walkable patterns of development. It is important to note that for owners of historic buildings, there are modern ways to improve energy efficiency. In past webinars, you've received guidance on ways to save on water and electricity. There are also ways to incorporate weatherization and efficiency measures into your historic building without removing historic fabric. The Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office, along with the Connecticut Green Bank, has written a document that is available on their website It is geared toward homeowners, but many of the lessons translate to houses of worship. There is also guidance from the National Park Service, whose pamphlet you can see here. This document discusses the proper placement of solar panels and other efficiency and sustainability measures. To illustrate the amount of waste that enters the stream from demolition of historic structures, FEMA has a calculator which estimates that for each average sized family home with a basement, there is 45 to 50 cubic yards of waste, which is about the size of 3 large construction dumpsters that enters the waste stream. So to extrapolate that to include the square footage of a much larger house of worship means the retention of historic religious structures is critical to help protect our environment. And I want to end with our own case study related to historic structures in Bridgeport, historic religious structures in Bridgeport. Our field service director, Mike Farino, identified 5 churches surrounding Washington Park in East Bridgeport, almost by accident, because 2 of the 5 congregations reached out to us within the span of a few weeks. After holding a series of community meetings, a coalition of 5 churches was formed, and an application was put together for the Community Investment Fund. The purpose of the Community Investment Fund 2030 is to foster economic development in historically underserved communities across the state. The Community Investment Fund is providing a total of $875 million to eligible municipalities for nonprofit organizations and community development corporations that operate within them. Through the incredible dedication of our staff and the community, who have made several attempts to earn the grant, we were thrilled to have been awarded just over $5.1 million this past spring. The churches listed here are all going to receive assistance in the form of planning documents and capital grants to fix roofs, steeples, windows, exterior walls, and basements. The most pressing issues will be addressed first, especially those that pose a risk to public safety, but work will include much-needed mechanical upgrades and kitchen modernizations. These congregations serve their communities on such a critical level, providing food, shelter, and support programs for their neighborhood residents, that these improvements will have wide-reaching impacts. This project means a great deal to our organization, and we see it as a springboard to replicate similar impacts in communities throughout the state. Even as we are just beginning this project, we are keeping our eyes open for potential future projects. And that is my presentation for today. These are the circuit riders that I mentioned when I was showing you our staff, who are always available to come out to your site and meet with you and your building committee, take a look at the building, see what your issues are, and help you prioritize repairs, point you to funding sources, point you to contractors, architects, any advice that you might need for your building. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and hope that we can be of service.
Jane, that was amazing. That was so much really good information. And as much as I have worked with houses of worship through Connecticut, I honestly had no idea there were so many different sources of funding for houses of worship that would dovetail so well with sort of the energy and environmental concerns that I know a lot of them are looking at. So that's phenomenal. So I have some questions actually. And folks, if you have questions, we've got the chat open and the Q&A, and hopefully everyone can access those. So just pop them in there and we will get to them. The bond funding you mentioned from the state. And I know when I was looking at I can't remember what they call it, but some version of the budget, and there were all these churches that had, 5 or sometimes even 6-figure numbers next to their name that had come through. How does one make that happen with their legislator?
Right. So that is developing a really good relationship with your state rep and your federal rep, because you can get funding from the state legislature, and there are, congressionally directed funds too that I didn't even get into. But that was part of the Community Investment Fund process as well. That is also a bond source
Hmm.
of funding. So one of the reasons it took us 3 or 4 tries to get through the bonding process was developing those connections, with the local reps in the area and making sure that they were aware of the project and getting their support.
And so you're
So it's
referring to the Washington Park project, or
correct.
oh,
Correct,
that's
yeah.
amazing. So you were able,
Yeah,
Preservation CT was able to get funding through the state for that project as well.
yes, and that was through the community. So having a coalition of 5 churches, and we had established a committee, a working committee of stakeholders in the neighborhood, and having all of them contacting their representatives, and helping with letters of support and really drawing, really raising the level of importance for that project in the eyes of the local legislators was really probably the hardest part of getting the application approved, is making sure that all the decision makers knew about this project and were excited about it as the community was.
That's amazing. And so did the funding come to you, or did it go directly to the individual
So this is
houses of
an
worship?
unusual situation where we decided to apply on behalf of the 5 churches. Churches can apply on their own,
Right. Yeah.
but we
I saw that
decided
too.
to do it as a coalition with the community behind us. And we think that one benefit to that is that all of, state grants are, you know, somewhat difficult to manage, but there's a lot of contracting and a lot of steps. And so we're hoping that because the grant is going through us, that there will be a level of efficiency with contracting and contractors and being able to efficiently disperse the money and organize the grant. But also taking some of that burden off of these congregations who may not have the capacity through their board or their volunteers to really manage such a project. So we're hoping we can get more done by having one organization overseeing it all and helping coordinate all of the moving parts.
Sure, that's amazing. And I noticed there were a lot of programs that did offer that sort of technical assistance, beyond just funding, but actually offered some help with consultants and planning and that sort of thing, which I think would be pretty important for houses of worship, since they're usually pretty short. They have very small staff, and a lot of the folks that are doing the heavy lifting are volunteers, so
Correct. And that's
that
what
was
we like to be able to offer at Preservation Connecticut is we are the boots on the ground. We're the ones you can call to talk about the issues. We can look at the grant applications with you and help you sort through that. We can look at bids that you're getting if you don't know how to put together a bid or how to, run a bid process. We're available to provide a lot of hands-on assistance for organizations.
That's awesome. I had another question about the different matches. And I know especially I was looking at the Partners in Sacred Places, that particular match. I've noticed with some federal grants, when they have a match, they allow you to include volunteer hours that have a value of like $28 an hour towards the match. Is that true for these different matching funds? Are they allowed to include volunteer hours as well as cash?
You have to look at the specific guidelines for each program.
Okay.
Typically for the state grants that we work with, it's a dollar for dollar cash match.
Okay. Okay. All right. And how long do you think the Washington Park project will take? You just mentioned it, you were
Mhm.
sort of just starting, but how long do you
Yep,
think it?
so we were just awarded. Um, in our proposal, we expected to take 3 years.
Okay. Sounds
So
like a reasonable.
knock on wood, hopefully only 3 years.
Right, yeah, exactly, totally. So Charles has a question. He said, "We don't actually own our own church building anymore. We sold it to the local soup kitchen in the early 2000s. We rent our space from them. So my question is, we have an organ that needs a lot of work done to it in the range of like 35 to 50K to complete it. Are there any grants that we could apply for that could be used for that work?"
That is a good question. We do get that a lot. Um, I'm gonna have to go back to my staff and see where have we sent people in the past for that. That doesn't typically fall under, like, the restoration for the building. That's a specialized,
Interesting.
um, project,
No,
but
that
we
would be
have.
a lot of folks have organs that are, need repair and whatnot, and that would definitely be, and repairing a pipe organ is a daunting task.
Yes, and that is not the first time we've heard that question, so I apologize that I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, Stephen has his hand up. Stephen, do you want to put your question in the chat or the Q&A? Oh, wait a minute. I can, let me see if anyone's, I will. Okay, Stephen, I'm gonna allow you to talk, so. Stephen, are you there? Please. Right, he put his hand up for a while ago. Okay. Un All right, I'm just gonna if hopefully he'll. Sometimes allowing people to talk can be a little bit a long process. So, but here's another question. In terms of some of these application processes, how long does it take for folks once they begin the grant process to actually having the funding, and um how much work pre-planning do they have to do?
Mhm.
And do they need to show contracts and commitments and stuff before they can apply for grants?
So that's a great question. I would say you need to be thinking pretty far down the road. Um, Meeting with a circuit rider off the front will help you lay out what the funding cycles are for the particular projects that you need. Um, right now, we're seeing that grant applications are, as always, highly competitive, a lot of demand, and only getting more and more so. The expectation should be a kind of a long game of figuring out what your needs are, because you're going to have to do some capital campaigning to go along with the grant funding as well, and getting in the pipeline for those grants.
For sure. Okay, great. Here, Charles has another question, which I hear all the time. What about repairing stained glass windows that are damaged? Is there any funding available that would cover that?
Mhm. So the capital grants that I spoke about do cover that. Um, we have to be careful with state funding if there's, specific iconic imagery in the windows. But if it's, a geometric pattern or nature, or, something that doesn't have a strong iconography attached to it, it can be part of the capital grants that the state provides and that Preservation Connecticut provides.
And that actually segues to another question. Are there sort of bumps in the road that appear for folks where they can actually be denied permission to do work because it interferes with the historic nature of the building? It was interesting to see that church had solar on it, because sometimes people say, yeah, we're not allowed to get solar because of this. But are there other areas where a project could actually be denied for that purpose, for that reason?
Um, I don't I don't foresee that, particularly if you've had some consultation ahead of time. Um, that seems like something that would be known in advance.
Okay.
Um,
And would that be the sort of thing a circuit rider might be able to give you a
yeah,
heads up on?
absolutely, yes.
Great. And Charles says his stained glass windows have mostly religious figures and depictions of Bible scenes. So that is the stained
Yeah,
glass that.
so in that case, I so it is harder for us to fund windows like that. But what you could do is, if you're looking at, like, your overall preservation plan and you need to do something with the roof, or you have plaster repair, or there are other projects that are going along with that, and maybe you can then segregate where, certain money is going towards the windows, like the private funding that you're raising should go along with it, can go be invested in the windows.
Mhm.
And the state money or grant money can be used for other elements of the restoration project.
I know I was at the energy fair in Stonington, I think last year, and I ran into a company that does sort of um energy efficiency for unusually shaped windows, so it wasn't just like a window company. They actually do um they do they do windows like church windows and stuff with stained glass, unusual sizes and whatnot to make them more energy efficient so they don't actually have to nothing happens to the historic nature.
Right.
I know there I like the company was based in Simsbury. Are there other companies that
Mhm.
you're aware of that do that type of work?
Yes. Not off the top of my head. I
Okay.
can give you some resources.
No, that's a yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I know that's because sometimes people need to repair the stained glass, and sometimes all they
Yep.
really want is to leave the stained glass alone, but make it more
Right.
efficient so people can still enjoy the beauty, but it's not,
Yeah, and
leaking energy
as you
out.
were describing that, I was thinking that probably could fall under some of the grant programs if you're not actually working with the stained glass window
Mhm.
itself, but you're doing a protective measure to it, or it's the framing or some other repairs to it. That might be something that qualifies.
Okay, that'd be great. I know I mean, Windows obviously, Connecticut has, I would say we've got the most beautiful houses of worship, and they're so gorgeous and they're all so old. You know what I mean? It's like just so much opportunity for efficiency and whatnot,
Mhm.
but we obviously don't want to disturb their historic nature. Does anyone else like, wow, we don't have too many questions, although we are at 12:51, so we're almost to our hour. Are there any other questions? Is there anything that I haven't touched on? How much actually in the Preserving Black Churches Fund, what is the average grant for those churches? Do you have an idea or a grant range?
Yeah, I think it was $50,000 and more.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, we haven't had one awarded in Connecticut yet. So
Okay. Well, I mean,
it,
I can think of a
it's a,
couple
a
off the top of
nationwide
my head that I
program.
think would be really interested. So
Hmm.
that'd be amazing. Um, cool. Any other questions, guys? Honestly, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Jane, thank you so much for that presentation. That was so helpful. I I learned so much, and I'll probably reach out for any more resources if you have them to provide. And um, yeah, that was really terrific. So folks, if for you who are attending, I will get this up on IRE Jan's YouTube channel, put it on our website, along with the slide deck, any associated resources. And then I'll also send you the links to the other two webinars as well, so that you can kind of see these as a three-part series to help preserve your house of worship and make it more energy efficient and uh, install clean energy if you want. Yeah, I think that's about it. I don't see any more questions. And Jane, again, thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yay. And I look forward to working with you, and hopefully we'll be able to really help a lot of houses of worship in Connecticut.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.